Mic test, mic test. We're just testing the audio for the live stream. Apologies. So we're good. All right, thank you. So, okay, we can start.
Good morning, everyone. So welcome to this event. This event is the first one in the Literary and Cultural Studies Festival, which is a week-long celebration hosted by the Literary and Cultural Studies program. This is also the second iteration of the Literary and Cultural Studies Foundational Lectures. Last year, we had Dr. Soledad Reyes as our speaker, and today we are honored to have Dr. Nicanor Tiongson. So this lecture is titled Manong, Valuing the Cinema of Gerardo de Leon. This is hosted by the LCSP, Kritika Kultura, and PLUME in cooperation with Kagawaran ng Filipino, the Ateneo Institute of Literary Arts and Practices, and the Rizal Library. To open our event, we have Dr. Charlie Verick, the Program Director of the Literary and Cultural Studies Program.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming to the lecture by Dr. Nicanor G. Tiongson. We are fortunate to have him today, and this particular event is intended to continue the series that we've titled Foundational Lectures. And the idea behind the series is to reconstruct the memory of Philippine studies in particular, and Philippine cultural studies in general. And we started, as Francis Soliano stated earlier, with the lecture by Dr. Soledad Reyes last semester, and she spoke about her own memory of the Filipinization of the university in the 1960s. The remembrance of Filipinization as a movement is important because the newly established Literary and Cultural Studies program is part of that history. In the 1960s in particular, especially after the publication of Down from the Hill in 1968, to be specific, the university went through a period of Filipinization. And Dr. Soledad Reyes was there, was able to witness that moment. And Dr. Nicanor G. Tiongson was actually an important part of that movement, along with Dr. Bienvenido Lumbera. Dr. Tiongson and Dr. Lumbera together, along with their peers, started the Kagawaran ng Araling Pilipino in 1970, 2 years after the publication of Dawn from the Hill in 1968. Dr. Tiongson was also the very first professor at the Ateneo to teach Philippine literature, and he did so when there was still the Department of English. The topic that he will explore today is also equally significant because he's going to talk about Gerardo de Leon, whose career took off also in the 1960s. And so that particular decade was a period of the consolidation of Filipino nationalism. And that's the nationalism that more or less we know today. But how much do we know about that particular period? It's hard to say at this point. And so this lecture is significant because it allows us to understand the greater context for Filipinization, especially in the field of cinema. So thank you very much, everyone, for coming. We're all in for a treat because at this point, we shall remember.
It's my honor to introduce our speaker, Dr. Nicanor G. Tiongson. He received an AB in Humanities from the Ateneo de Manila University in 1965. He was an instructor at the college in 1968 to 72, during which time he received a FAURA research grant to develop a textbook for the teaching of Philippine literature at the School of Arts and Sciences, and edited the first issues of Katipunan, the first language scholarly journal for the Philippine Studies Department, now the Kagawaran ng Filipino in 1971. Dr. Tiongson is also Professor Emeritus of the UP Film Institute and former Dean of the College of Mass Communication, University of the Philippines, Diliman. He served as Artistic Director and Vice President of the Cultural Center of the Philippines. He is also a founding member and former chair of the Manonuri ng Pelikulang Filipino. He is a Lifetime Achievement Awardee of the Philippine Development Council of the Philippines. Friends, join me in welcoming Dr. Nick Tiongson.
Okay. Hello. Okay. Ay. Okay. Magandang umaga sa ating lahat at salamat sa inyong pagdalo sa lecture na ito. Magandang introduction ni Charlie kasi yung concept ng Philippinization ay siyang pinanggalingan noong lahat ng pagpupunyagi namin sa research noong panahon na yon. Yung henerasyon namin pumasok sa iba't ibang genre ng sining sa Pilipinas kasi gusto naming balikan talaga yung mga tradisyon na sa isang tabi dahil sa kanluraning edukasyon natin, lalo na kami sa Ateneo noong 1960s. I graduated from the Ateneo without having taken a single subject in Philippine history. Actually, wala kaming talaga sa Philippines mostly. So, ang literature namin was completely Anglo-American. Ang history was European, not even American. No? So, nagkaroon ng reaction, nagsisimula na kami ng reaction noon pa man na bakit kailangan balikan ang sarili nating kultura at magkakasabay lahat yun na pag-akyat paglakas ng aktivismo, kasama doon yung buong rethinking ng arts and sciences. So itong pagpasok ko, originally sa English ako talaga, pumunta ako sa panitikan, pero ang naging focus ko ay teatro, as you all know, no? Yun ang talagang discipline ko. Tapos, nung mga mid-70s, na-realize namin sa Manonuri. Ang Manonuri, karamihan taga-Ateneo nag-establish. Si Bien, si Nestor Torres, ako, si Doy del Mundo, Pio de Castro, right? Yung iba, taga-UP at saka yung iba ay taga-UST, no? Pero na-realize namin, pinaka-powerful na medium ang pelikula. So, at sa aking pananaw, konektado siya sa teatro diretso yung connection sa teatro talaga ng pelikula. Kaya it was natural for me to move from theater to film. Kasi ang unang mga gumawa ng pelikula, lumabas sa pelikula, nagsulat ng pelikula, ay galing sa teatro. Right? So dala-dala nila yung lahat ng tradition and values ng teatro sa pelikula. At kasama doon sa mga pangunahin doon sa mga artista na yon na nanggaling sa teatro, si Manong. Right? Ang Ilagan clan is a major clan in Philippine culture. No? You cannot write the history of Philippine theater and Philippine cinema without mentioning the Ilagan clan. Okay? And ipapakita natin ngayon kung ano yung naging kontribusyon ni Manong. Sa Ilagan, sa mga Ilagan, si Manong ang pinakamahalagang artista na na-produce noong buong clan na yon. Ano? Okay. So, ito ay, itong lecture na ito ay parang prelude dun sa, yung libro ay ilalabas na sa October 8. So, imbitado kayong lahat doon. Ilo-launch na yung libro nito, Manong, The Life and Works of Gerardo de Leon, sa Cinemalaya event siya sa Shangri-La Plaza on October 8, 5 p.m. So you're all invited to that. That's open to the public, no? Okay. So, hinango ko itong lecture na ito doon sa libro. So, mahabang-mahaba yung libro. The book is 700 plus pages, no? So, konting-konti lang yung maisasama natin dito. So, the title is Valuing the Cinema of Gerardo de Leon, both meaning evaluating and cherishing that cinema as something very, very important to our cultural identity. Okay. So, I want to introduce the life and works of National Artist for Film, Gerardo de Leon. Siya yung pangalawang National Artist for Film. Nauna si Abellana, 76. Si de Leon was 82, 1 year after he died. Identify his major themes and describe and analyze his unique visual style. Actually, pinakakilala siya for a visual style na siya lang ang meron. Sa tatak talaga niya yon. Right? And evaluate his legacy to the Philippine cinema and nation. Okay. So the background, importante sa kanya talaga, para maintindihan mo si Gerardo de Leon, kailangan maintindihan mo saan siya nanggaling. So family, professions, the silence, the talkies, and the influences. Ito yung background niya. Right? Nanggaling siya, anak siya ni Hermogenes Ilagan, okay? Si Moneng, who is considered by some as the father of the Tagalog Zarzuela. Okay? Ito yung nasa picture. At yung kanyang ina, si Casiana de Leon, was a zarzuela and drama actress. No? All of Moneng's children had to learn how to play the piano, sing, and act in his plays, as well as wash, dry, and iron their own clothes. He also encouraged them to think for themselves. He required all of them to pursue a profession and be at the top of the profession, because only as professionals will they be respected in society. Right? Why is that? Noong panahon na yon, hindi ginagalang ang mga artista. Artista ng teatro at artista ng pelikula, mababa ang tingin sa kanila. So sabi ni Moneng, kikilalanin lang kayo kung meron kayong profession. Kaya karamihan sa kanila, pumasok talaga sa mga established professions. No? Gerardo de Leon finished medicine at UST and finished 5th at the board exam. Right? So he was not an ordinary student. Si de Leon, namana niya sa ama niya yung obsession with perfection. Right? Talagang every detail, niya, bubusisiin niya. No? Ito yung kanyang mga kapatid, sa ina niya at sa iba pang babae, no? Kasi Moneng had children by 3 women, with Casiana, the wife, 7, with Margarita Arevalo, 3, and Antonina Hernandez, 3. Hindi ito masyadong sinasabi ng mga Ilagan, basta sila, magkakapatid sila lahat. I-introduce sila magkakapatid lahat. Actually, hindi. Half brothers lang, half sisters yung iba, no? Okay. Conrado Conde, De Leon Ilagan. Nilagay ko yung middle name para alam nyo kung sino yung magkakapatid, pareho ng ina, no? So Conrado Conde is Conrado de Leon Ilagan, Sampaguita film director and orchestra conductor. Laling Talti was Pilar de Leon Ilagan, was a comedian and pharmacist. Kita mo yung mga ano sila lahat. Tito Arevalo, Eustacio Arevalo Ilagan. Okay? So, ibang ina na yan. Composer, musical scorer, actor, and lawyer. Okay? Gerardo de Leon Ilagan, film and stage actor, a doctor of medicine. Angel Esmeralda, Angel Arevalo Ilagan, film and stage actor, singer, and lawyer. Edo Nagali is Ilagan baligtad, di ba? Alfredo de Leon Ilagan, film and stage comedian, radio producer. And others, mga lawyers din ito mga to, tsaka teachers, Rosa, Luz, and Simplicio de Leon Ilagan, Cesar Arevalo Ilagan, namatay agad, and yung sa pangatlong asawa, Honor Hermogenes Jr. and Patria Hernandez Ilagan. Okay? Almost all appeared in Manong's plays or in films directed by his brother, Mar I. Esmeralda. So, yung generation ni Manong, ano din yun? Actors din yun. Tapos ang ama nila, yung Simplicio, was a bandmaster in Bigaa, Bulacan. Okay? So, taga Bulacan yung pamilya na ito. No? Nag-move na sila when Manong went to Manila. Na nag-aral din siya sa Ateneo. Na-discover siya ng isang Jesuita, I think Jesuit. Narinig siyang kumakanta sa choir sa Bigaa. Tapos in-offer siya na kumanta sa Santa Cruz Church. In exchange, paparalin siya sa Ateneo. Right? So nag-aral siya, marunong siya ng Latin, ha? Marunong siya, nakapagsalita siya ng Latin, ng Kastila. Pero he dropped out kasi the call of the theater was stronger. No? So hindi na niya tinapos, pumasok na siya sa teatro, lumabas na siya. Okay. Ito yung pamilya nila. Taken, I think, around 1940. Right? Hermogenes is seated, yung matandang lalaki, at saka si Cassiana yung nandun dun sa kanan. Yung nasa likod, ang importante, si Tito Arevalo, from left to right. Tito Arevalo, Conrado Conde, Angel Esmeralda, Laling Talti, and then Conrado Conde and Gerardo de Leon. Okay. As you can see, they're very good looking. Yung bahay nila sa Sampaloc, ang tawag ng mga neighbors, bahay ng magagandang lalaki. Okay. Okay. GDL raised his own family consisting of first wife Patricia Dix and their children Liberty and Victory. Yan, hindi rin sinasabi yan. May unang asawa siya, hindi lang si Feli Vallejo. Okay? Patricia Dix came from a family, American yung ama niya, one of the American soldiers who came during the Philippine-American War. And then he stayed on in Samar and had a ranch, so yumaman doon. Na-meet niya yan, at doon niya anak si Liberty at si Victory. Kasi magtataka yung mga tao, bakit si Victory at si Liberty, mestiza? Eh si Baby hindi, yung pangatlo. No? After Dix got sick, his second wife, Feli Vallejo, and their only child, Maria Fe, Baby Ilagan. Feli Vallejo, singing star of many pre-war musicals, raised the three daughters and supported GDL without reservation. She gave up her own profession, right, for him. GDL allowed his children to read even banned books, but was conservative in regard to their suitors. GDL was fond of the grandson, Jano Gibbs, son of Maria Fe, and Ronaldo Valdez. Okay. Silence and Talkies. Okay. He was born 1913. Okay, so silence pa yung una niyang experience with films. As a high school student, GDL played the piano for European and American silent films, like the series Perils of Pauline and the Volga Boatman. You can find these films now online. No? Watching these silent films showed him the techniques and importance of visual storytelling. Yun ang sabi niya. Ang natutuhan niya sa silent film, visual storytelling. Sabi niya, mahusay na direktor, kahit alisin mo yung sound, dapat maintindihan ng audience yung nangyayari. And he applied that to himself. Pagka pinapanood niya, inaalis niya yung sound. Sabi niya, pag hindi niyo naintindihan, I will reshoot it. Okay? Ibig sabihin, hindi siya visual storytelling. GDL acted for the stage, right? And then for Parlaton in supporting roles. Ang nakakatawa yung role niya, palagi siyang matanda. Ito yung itsura niya, pinatanda. As judge, senator, or father to his own siblings. Sometimes to the sibling who's older than himself in real life. That started when he played sa Dalagang Bukid, right? Siya yung matanda doon na may gusto kay Atang de la Rama. Okay? The films included Dangal, Pusong Dakila, Pagbabalik, Makiling, Ruben de Salong Perlas, and Binatang Bukid. His first leading role was Ruiseñor, right? After which he also appeared as lead in Ama at Anak and Tayug. He was a very good actor, by the way. Lahat ng mga niya, yung Ama at Anak at saka Tayug got very good notices for his acting. Okay, influences and inspirations in filmmaking. Importante ito para makita natin kung paano siya nabuo, yung mental furniture niya, kumbaga. GDL learned his craft from local directors, right, from Parlaton. So, Jose Nepomuceno, Mar Esmeralda, his uncle, Vicente Solombides, Carlos Padilla, Octavio, and Manuel Silos. Of Nepomuceno, GDL said, Don Jose's early productions were first class and made motion picture history, technically, photographically, and dramatically. Don Jose introduced fine set design, authentic costuming. He was a talented scenario writer. The quality of his photography was always well in advance of his time, and he was probably the first to make a conscious attempt to deliberately produce dramatic effect by visual pattern alone. There were invariably sequences of surpassing beauty. Right? He saw the first production of Noli Me Tangere and of Filibusterismo by Nepomuceno in 1930 and 31. GDL admired certain artists and artworks. So he was, hindi siya parochial at all. Exposed talaga siya to world art. Rembrandt especially, because for the use of the cross-light effect, which gave the subject three-dimensionality, and of course the chiaroscuro effect. No? And Juan Luna's Poliarium for blocking and storytelling. Okay? Dito nanggaling, dito niya in-apply he created a statement that has been repeated over and over again. Every shot should tell a story. So sa kanya, sinasabi niya, kahit walang sound, kahit hindi pa gumagalaw, pag nakita mo yung composition, yung lighting, yung relation ng mga actors, dapat naintindihan mo na kung anong sitwasyon. Okay? That's what you see in this painting. Right? Diba? Isang tingin mo, alam mo yung istorya. May istorya siya. Okay? Yun ang gustong-gusto niya dito sa painting na to. Also, the way the body is being hauled in a diagonal fashion. Ano siya teatro talaga siya yung yung imagination niya. Books he read and admired. Ernest Lindgren, this is a very basic film art book, which formalized his knowledge of cinematic documents. Actually, nung basahin niya, sabi niya, ginagawa ko nitong mga ito . So, doon pa lang niya na-realize na ito pala yun. Ito pala yung tawag doon. Ito pala yung concept nun. John Alton's painting with light, favorite niya yun, which exposed him to more techniques of chiaroscuro lighting. Right? Kasi yun ang kanyang forte, chiaroscuro. Sergei Eisenstein's will form and Vsevolod Butovkin's film technique and acting, which showed him a range of editing techniques. Konstantin Stanislavski, actor's workbook, whose insight into method acting, GDL adapted to Filipino actors. Meron siyang sariling teorya ng dalawang klase ng acting, which is based on Stanislavski. Okay? Raised by a father who was a Mason and freethinker, GDL also acquired and read books banned by the Catholic Church, like the writings of Marquis de Sade, Georges Bataille, D.H. Lawrence, Vladimir Nabokov, the Kama Sutra, and Sigmund Freud. Gidel believed that sexuality is an essential part of the human experience and should be shown on screen, but always responsibly. He did not like bomba at all. So I mean, that's not sexual. That's not sexy, right? So this is how he got into trouble with the censors. Because he insisted on showing sexuality kasi part yun ng human experience, part ng Filipino experience, ba't di mo papakita? Okay? He was influenced by silent films, so Perils of Pauline, The Volga Boatman, which showed him how to tell a story with pictures only. And American talkies like The Birth of the Nation, Citizen Kane, The Searchers, which showed him the possibilities of lighting and camera work, including deep focus and long takes. Right? So this is the famous scene from Citizen Kane, yung use ng deep focus, di ba? From foreground to middle ground to extreme background in one shot, telling a story. Okay? I think if you know Citizen Kane, alam niyo yung story nito, di ba? Ito yung moment na nag-sign ng paper yung ina niya na ipapadala na si Kane, no, alagaan, in exchange for the development of their oil and their property. Hindi alam ni Kane yun, ng bata, na pinagbibili na siya practically. And that causes his tragedy. Yung loss ng childhood na yun and innocence is what caused him to yung downfall niya later on. American musicals, Oklahoma, Carousel, South Pacific, and ang favorite niya, West Side Story, which he saw 5 times, which exposed him to the creative merging of drama, music, and dance in film, right? While Mexican films like The Pearl, you can access it also online, ang ganda-ganda ng The Pearl na yan. He admired for the work of brilliant cinematographer Gabriel Figueroa, who captured the essence of the Mexican landscape and psyche in his shots, right? Merong shots siya na kahawig nito sa daigdig ng mga api. Makita mo kung saan nanggagaling yung influences niya. Gidel also watched European art films, like Ingmar Bergman's Virgin Spring, Seventh Seal, Wild Strawberries, which had deep characterization and stunning visual style. Japanese art films, like Akira Kurosawa's Rashomon and Seven Samurai, which he loved for the mise-en-scène and camera techniques like shooting directly at the sun through the leaves, no, of the trees. Na ginamit niya sa Noli Me Tangere kay Sisa. Nung nawabaliw na siya, yung sun through the leaves, no? And Yasujiro Ozu's Tokyo Story, which used unusual camera angles to capture different types of relationships between characters, as well as the Indian film Pater Panchali for its honest but unsentimental portrait of poverty in a small Indian village. Itong the last scene of Seven Seal, di ba? Yung The Dance of Death. Okay? Makita mo sa film niya sa daigdig ng mga api, may shot siya na ganyan din. Procession naman sa pilapil sa during yung tag-init at tag-tuyot. Okay. Gidel's activities, from his participation in his father's plays, which trained him in acting, singing, and projecting on stage, his piano playing for silent films, which sharpened his visual sense, his assiduousness at his medical studies, which increased his powers of scientific observation and understanding of human psychology, his dedication to excellence in performing his roles for film, his initiative in studying the elements and techniques of filmmaking through working with senior directors, reading books on film, observing artworks, and critical viewing of some of the masterpieces of cinematic art from the US, Europe, and Asia, all these equipped GDL with the skills and the consciousness needed for his career as film director, which, however, would be severely limited by an industry weighed down by commercialism, censorship, onerous taxation, and foreign competition. Okay, this is just yung kanyang career in terms of the studios and the films that he created, no? So, nagsimula siya pre-war. Actually, yung first film niya, Bahay Kubo, half lang yung na-direct niya doon. That's actually directed by Don Danon. He was assistant director. But Don Danon liked liked his idea so much that when he got sick, Don Danon gave him the directorship of the film. No? So pre-World War II films, Parlaton Hispano-Filipino, Sampaguita, LVN. RDR is Roel de la Rosa Productions. GDL directed 6 musicals and dramas, Bahay Kubo, Ama at Anak, Prinsesa ng Kumintang, Estrelita, Panambitan, Ang Maestra, and Anong Ganda Mo. Andun siya sa picture. He's the one on the extreme left. Right? And yung dalawa sa gitna, Ardo Vallejos, Ernesto, the violinist, and Feli Vallejo, na pangasawa niya. Okay. World War II productions, 43 to 44. During the war, GDL directed stage shows. It was also forced to co-direct Dawn of Freedom with Abe Yutaka and to direct Tatlong Maria, both Japanese propaganda films. Right? Bakit siya pumayag doon? Kasi wala siyang choice. Right? Ano yun? Hindi, lahat ng mga lumabas sa pelikulang ito, pinilit ng mga Hapon. So, pag hindi, like, ang pinakagrabe si Carmen Rosales kasi Carmen Rosales was in guerrilla. Okay? Sharpshooter na guerrilla si Carmen Rosales. Okay? Nung inimbita siya, wala siyang magawa. Sabi, pag hindi ka pumayag, papatayin yung pamilya mo. Okay? Later, inaccuse si Gerardo de Leon ng collaboration. Pero napatunayan na yung pala all the time, he was head of a medical corps ng mga guerrillas during the war. Post-war productions, 46 to 47, he was with Sampaguita. GDL directed 4 films for Sampaguita, Solong America, Isumpa Mo Giliw, Tayug. Tayug is the Pangasinan Revolt, no? Mameng Iniibig Kita. Then, in 1947, a very important incident. The accident happened, okay? The cab he was riding in and with Feli was hit from behind by a truck driven by a drunken American soldier. As he hovered between life and death, he realized his mission in life was to direct movies with nation themes. Sinabi niya, may turning point talaga sa buhay niya. Parang vocation, no? Post-war productions, in this period, GDL made mainly for films for one studio, Premiere Productions. Yun ang home studio talaga niya, of the Santiagos. No? For Premiere, he did some of his best films that constitute his first golden period from 49 to 52. Padre Burgos, 48 Oras, Doble Cara, Kamay ni Satanas, Diego Silang, Sisa, Sawa sa Lumang Simborio, and Bagong Umaga. Ang themes dito, basically, is the Spanish period, no? It's the struggle of Filipinos against the oppression of Spain. Right? Kahit yung Sawa sa Lumang Simborio, ano yun eh, mga bandido sila kasi victim sila ng Spanish oppression. For Premiere, he also did many commercial movies, fantasy films, Jezebel. Siya ang unang gumawa ng Jezebel. Right? And everybody followed after that. No? Big commercial success yan. Sanda Wong for Hong Kong, Banganin si Madar, and then comedies like Eva si Adan at saka Pedro Penduko, dramas like Kamay ni Cain, Bicol Express, Bakyamo Neneng, Obra Maestra, light romantic comedies, Mr. and Mrs., Bella Filipina, Sweethearts, and Shirley My Darling. An important serious film was Ifugao from 1954. No? But he did everything. Ha? Tingnan mo, genius ka nga pero hindi ka pwedeng mag-survive kung hindi mo gagawin yan. He was very lucky that Ciro Santiago understood him, right? And supported his most important films. Kahit mahal yung pelikula at hindi kumita, sinuport pa rin kasi naniniwala sa kanya. Post-war productions, 58 to 76. By 58, GDL also started directing films for independent film companies. At alam niyo yung story ng mga studio, di ba? Nag-dismantle yung mga 1960s because of labor problems, lumabas yung mga independent film companies. Ushering in a second golden period for him, right? Almost 10 years, exactly 10 years, for 4 years, no? Hanggang sa Dulo ng Daigdig, Nole Metangere, The Moises Padilla Story, El Filibusterismo, Akong Katarungan, and Barilan sa Pugadlawin. This is Robert Arevalo as Basilio in Filibusterismo. from 58 to 70, GDL also started to direct or co-direct B movies, right? So he went through this phase na Eddie Romero, because of Eddie Romero, his mentor, his mentee, who eventually got him to direct for all these Filipino-American co-productions, made cheaply in the Philippines but earning dollars in the US market. So Day of the Trumpet, which is has a very, very pro-American point of view about the Philippine-American War. Terrorism Man, Walls of Hell Intramuros, Kulay Dugo ang Gabi, Brides of Blood Island, Ibulong Mo sa Hangin, Mad Doctor of Blood Island, Women in Cages. Many of these are available up to now, right? Kung minsan maawa ka sa kanya, obviously he had to earn, no? So he had to do all this, ano? Pero ironically, kahit na ganun ka-commercial, hindi niya pinapabayaan yung cinematography at saka yung ang husay pa din ng editing. Kaya, by the way, Quentin Tarantino mentioned him directly because of these films. Napanood niya yung mga pelikulang ito. At na-impress siya talaga sa work ni Gerardo de Leon. Right? Which means that, yun ang totoong artist eh. Kasi sa pelikula, malalaman kung tunay kang artista pag binigyan ka na ng lahat ng mga ganyang klase ng pelikula. Yung talagang commercial, absolutely commercial, right? Kung mapapanitili mo pa rin yung ano mo, yung standards mo sa ganyang klase ng pelikula, you're a real artist, no? He also directed secret agent movies like Wanted Johnny L, Room 69, Gold Bikini, and Brownout, as well as serious films like Lilette, Fe Esperanza Caridad, and Banawe. A masterpiece from the period is Ang Daigdig ng Mga Api, which started out as a propaganda film for President Diosdado Macapagal in the 1965 elections, but which GDL turned into a socio-economic statement for exploited farmers. Hindi natapos for the elections. So, natataranta na yung staff niya, mag-election na ho. Hayaan mo mag-election sila. He didn't care. He got the money. He rewrote the whole script and made it a statement on peasant oppression by landlords. Okay? Censors Board, this is the one institution that GDL battled with throughout his career. The Board of Censors of Motion Pictures, whose criteria for censorship he considered conservative and arbitrary. GDL believed the BCMP put morality above reality and truth. Films like Si Eba't Si Adan, Filibusterismo, Huwag Mo Akong Limutin, were censored in ways that GDL felt were unfair. Kasi itong Huwag Mo Akong Limutin, dyan unang merong abortion, merong a woman who is, adulterous woman, okay? Kissing scenes, siya nag-unang gumawa ng mga yun eh. So, naban. At talagang hindi pwede palabas. So, he had to reshoot. Many scenes he had to reshoot para ma-approve lang ng censors. Major themes, so ito yung main analysis. Major themes of GDL's films. Okay? In evaluating GDL's works, allow me to use the criteria for, quote-unquote, a real director as defined by a leading and respected critic of that time, contemporaneous, no? T.D. Agkawili, who was active from pre-war days to the 1970s. Right? Nung inano ko yung anong framework yung gagamitin, ang obvious na framework talaga is the auteur theory. Right? But I did not want to use Saris and kasi controversial yung concepts ni Saris ng the auteur, no? And I was happy to find na meron palang sumulat na analyzing his films from that point of view. And surprisingly, this is actually the definition of the auteur theory by Peter Wallen. Kasi si Peter Wallen, inayos na yung concepts ng auteur theory. At finokus niya, sabi niya, saan mo nakikita yung personality ng director? Sa themes at saka sa style. And that's exactly what T.D. Agkawili was saying, no? At tama yung kwento. Ibig sabihin, parang homegrown din siya kasi binibase niya doon sa mga actual films na meron tayo. So going back to Kawini's definition, a real director is one who has devoted his energies, his intelligence, and creative faculties to the organic or interrelated realization of the two basic contents, the ideological and the visual. The ideological is concerned with the theme, subject, or topic, and the visual, which relates to the organization of the images that represent the ideas. No? So, but in GDL's case, the themes cannot be equated with story or subject matter, because as shown, GDL's films featured a wide range of genres and stories assigned to him by producers. However, one may extract certain thematic statements that recur in the majority of GDL's films. These themes may be classified into three: nationalist or nation theme, social, including political and economic, and psychological. Nationalist or nation themed films, these films have one consistent focus: the oppression of native Filipinos by include Padre Burgos, on the struggle against Spanish friars and officials; Sawa sa Lumang Simboryo, about native Filipinos who become bandits because of injustice under Spain; Kamay ni Satanas, whose main characters are involved in the revolution against Spain; Sisa, which allegorizes the Noli character as Filipinas herself, wooed by government and church of Spain and punished for refusing their offer of marriage in favor of the native everyman; Noli Me Tangere, which narrates the story of Ibarra and Maria Clara, who fall victim to the abuses of the Prilocracy and the Guardia Civil; El Filibusterismo, which toys with the idea of a violent uprising to end Spanish rule; and the unfinished film, Juan de la Cruz, which traces the tragic history of Elias's grandparents and parents under Spanish rule. He wanted to do 3 stories based on the Noli. Ang natapos lang niya yung Sisa. Sinisimulan na niya yung Juan de la Cruz, yun yung istorya ni Elias, yung pamilya ni Elias. Right? It stops, yung kay Elias nasa Noli na. So ang ginawa niya, trinage niya yung grandparents at saka yung parents. No? In evaluating GDL's works, the anti-Japanese occupation films, Commander Sundang, about 2 brothers who become known in the resistance as experts with the Sundang and their feats of valor to save fellow Filipinos from Japanese cruelty; and Walls of Hell Intramuros, about a group of Filipino guerrillas and American officers who saved thousands of Filipinos held hostage by Japanese soldiers who fought to the death in the walled city in February 1940 rather than surrender to MacArthur's forces. No? It should be noted that GDL did 2 Japanese propaganda films in 1944, but these were done under duress and should not be held against him, especially since he did them while secretly serving as a captain of the medical corps of an anti-Japanese guerrilla group under Andres Centenera. The pro-American and anti-communist films, ito yung interesting. Ano? Bakit nasa nationalist team yan? Kasi sa tingin niya, palagay ko, para sa bayan din to. Right? They seem to contradict GDL's nationalist stance about the Philippine-American War and the peasant resistance against the rule of abusive landlords allied with the U.S. colonial regime. In The Day of the Trumpet, he co-directed with Americanophile Eddie Romero. Eddie Romero is maka-Amerikano talaga yan. No? The American invaders are depicted in 1902 as benevolent foreigners bringing education to the rural area, while the Filipino resistance movement is personified by one hot-headed person who has no more followers, si Pancho Magalona. Yan yun, no? In Ifugao, the same image of the Americans invaders is projected. There is a literal marriage between the native leaders and 2 leaders of the occupation forces. A critic remarked very astutely that Ifugao is really a Western in ethnic clothes, with the Ifugaos playing the part of the savage Indians. So, ano to, influence na to ng mga napanood niya ng mga pelikula eh. Parang siguro, hubog na yon, di ba? Yung premise na yon, hindi na nako-question. In the 1950s, when the U.S. was trying to stem the tide of communism in Asia, first in Korea and later in Vietnam, GDL and other leading directors were commissioned to do films for the anti-communist cause, both at home and abroad. GDL's 10th Battalion sa 38th Parallel Korea showed the heroism of Filipinos in the anti-communist US-backed war in Korea, while Saigon depicted the mass exodus of North Vietnamese to the south to avoid communist rule in North Vietnam. Hindi lang siya yan, ha? They got the top directors, Roberto Avellana, Manuel Conde, Ramon Estela, to direct all of these propaganda movies. CIA talaga ito. CIA funded itong movies na to. Okay? It bothered me na, hindi ba niya naintindihan na CIA ito, etc. But then again, I realized, kung ako nabuhay sa panahon na yon, I probably would do the same thing. Kasi, ang communism was really, to them, a threat to the life they knew already. Right? So it wasn't so much being pro-American, but being anti-communist. And looking back now, they weren't wrong. Di ba? Look at what happened to China, to North Korea, and to, Vietnam, buti nagkaroon ng merging yung dalawa, no? And Russia, of course, no? So, parang tama rin yung fear na yun of communism eventually, no? Nung malaman natin. Ang na-sacrifice lang dito, kasi yung anti-communist na yon na stance ng Amerika is also together with their stance about the hierarchy in the Philippines. So in other words, pag tinanggap mo yung American point of view, kasama doon yung kanilang pananaw tungkol sa economic hierarchy natin. Okay? So ang sino masakripisyo doon? Yung mga peasants. Okay? Pero I don't think he consciously was anti-peasant. Kasi in later films niya talaga, very clear ang stand na pro-peasant siya. No? Okay, ito yung USI-funded means niya. Bagong umaga, about a sakada who organizes a union which is infiltrated by communist elements. So, ang kontrabida, komunista. And ang bagong maestra, the story of a man who goes back to the province to help to develop the community by building roads and repairing schools, hallmarks of the CIA Ramon Magsaysay Community Development Program. I don't think you were around then, but in the 50s, Ramon Magsaysay was the CIA president. Talaga naging presidente siya dahil sa CIA. No? Sabi nila, hindi lang ito matter of controlling the communist elements. No? Babalik at babalik yan pag hindi natin in-uplift yung communities. So, yun ang kanilang ginawa, yung PCAD, no? Ni Ramon Magsaysay. In these pro-US anti-communist films, one wonders whether GDL made them because he had been Americanized by his education and film exposure, and or whether he sincerely believed that the anti-communist films were beneficial to the nation in the 1950s, when the Hook movement became a real threat to the Philippine government. Okay, okay, the socially oriented films. These films depict different forms of injustice being inflicted on individuals or classes by fellow Filipinos who hold economic or political control over them. Okay? Mention ko lang, yung Walang Panginoon, maganda yung ginawa kasi usong-usong mga cowboy movies, di ba? Ginamit niya yung form, which is perfect for an action film, between landlord and peasants under him. Right? So, may statement talaga, very clear na statement na anti-landlord. Pero, ang form, action film, na cowboy. Right? So, nakakabayo sila. Pero, pag tingnan mo, panlabas yun eh. May statement talaga sinasabi tungkol sa lipunan natin. No? Yung anti-landlord pro-peasant films take a sympathetic stance towards peasants suffering from oppressive landlords, as in Tayog, Ang Bayong Api, about Pedro Calosa uprising in 1930. Walang Panginoon, which uses the genre of the Western to depict the abuses of one feudal family on a whole village of peasants. And the masterpiece of all, Ang Daigdig ng Mga Api, which depicts the harsh conditions in the countryside, usury, drought, pests, inhuman treatment by encargados, which drive peasants to use violence against their landlord. The anti-political injustice films present the point of view of the victims in films like 48 Oras and Doble Cara, where an innocent man is framed by circumstances or malicious intent to suffer for crimes he did not commit. And Hanggang sa Dulo ng Daigdig, which narrates the tragedy of a man, actually Nardong Putik, ito yung pinakaunang Nardong Putik film, who avenges his father's death in the hands of castle rustlers, and actually sinesensor itong Hanggang sa Dulo ng Daigdig. Nung malaman nila na tungkol kay Nardong Putik, sinabi ng military, change that. So supposedly, nire-write niya, pero hindi niya nire-write. Yun din yun. Right? Binago lang yung yung title. Right? Para pero yun pa rin yun. And this is a very important film. This is what made Pancho Magalon an actor. Right? The Moises Padilla story, one of his masterpieces, which depicts the inhuman torture and execution of an ordinary man who dared to run against an incumbent mayor, who was the candidate and ally of then ruthless Negros Occidental Governor Rafael Lacson of the governing Liberal Party. Okay? So, Rafael Lacson was a governor na, siya talaga, warlord, na may army, etc., no? Na malakas kay Quirino kasi dinaya niya yung eleksyon para kay Quirino, para manalo si Quirino. So, lahat ginagawa niya, walang nagrereklamo. Si Moises Padilla dared to run for mayor under the nationalista banner, nakalaban niya yung bata ni Rafael Lacson, na liberal. So, liberal ang mga naghahari sa panahon na ito. No? What they did to him was really unbelievable. Right? Yung torture that he underwent, 3 mayor yung kalaban niya. So, pinagpasapasahan siya, tinorture with every step. And then finally binaril with 15 gun wounds. No? It was meant to be propaganda against the liberals for the nationalistas. No? Pero natalo yung nationalista din. But itong pelikulang ito lang ang nag-stay on and to become a real a masterpiece, no? of Philippine cinema. The anti-crime films. Okay, highlight. Ito naman, di ba, yung mga agent, di ba? Ginaya din natin yung mga Hollywood na agents. Meron din siyang ganyan. Ala kang choice, pag gagawa sa'yo. Anong ginawa niya? Yung topics ang naging relevant. Sex trafficking, which was rampant in Manila at the time. Government corruption, smuggling by syndicates in films like Precinto 13, Wanted Johnny L., and Gold Bikini. Gold Bikini, may bomba rin yan. It should be noted that in these films, women are depicted as action heroines as well. So, mayroong positive aspect din dyan. No? Psychological films include those about relationships between couples or between generations or about sexuality. Yung relationship between sweethearts and married couples are usually challenged by a third party or by infidelity or by class or cultural differences. So, sa Pedro Penduko, a poor rural boy is attracted to the modern, wealthy Marina but goes back to his true love, a pretty rural lass who has loved him since childhood. Right? So, in all these stories, true love always triumphs above all economic or social obstacles. Second psychological theme is found in films that the conflict between families, no, involving parents and their children, or between individuals and peer groups. In Kamay ni Cain, interesting to, which is heavily influenced by East of Eden, right? And its rebel hero James Dean for each of the studios. Dito si Saldi Shornack ang James Dean character, right? So, hindi ba sa East of Eden, yung father at saka yung son, di ba? Si Cal. Dito, the father favors the second son because a soothsayer said he might die in the hands of the first son. But the reverse happens in the end. Yung pala ang mabait talaga, yung son na yun. In these films, the ending always reaffirms the importance of family, peer groups, and community, condemning the ambitious, selfish, and greedy. The third psychological theme is found in few films that depict sexuality in a realistic manner and or bravely experiments with gender topics considered taboo by censors and church. You have to imagine how strict the censorship was. right? In the 1950s and 1960s. No topics like homosexuality, abortion, adultery, hindi pwede lahat, right? Some American films were censored because they mentioned virginity, right? Grabe yung censorship at this particular time. So itong Eva at Adan is interesting. This was made after Jack and Jill ni Dolphy. Diba? You know that famous that made Dolphy a fan, di ba? Yung The Flaming Fagot. Okay? Doon sa pelikulang yon, pinagtatawanan yung gay. Object of derision siya. Interesting tong Eva at Adan kasi husband and wife exchange genders so that they will understand each other's situations as wife and husband. Kasi hindi sila magkaintindihan, palaging nag-aaway, right? Ang ginawa ng guardian angel nila, pinag-exchange yung kanilang kaluluwa. Naging babae yung lalaki at naging lalaki yung babae. Anong point? Hindi gender na pagtatawanan. Ang point niya is husband and wife must put themselves in the shoes of the other to be able to understand, di ba? It's really empathy. Empathy with each other, di ba? Rilet, a young woman is caught in a web of dysfunctional relationships, including incest between her father and grandmother, between her mother-in-law and her brother. Tatlong incest yun eh. Ngayon lang na-depict yung mga ganyan sa pelikula. In Wag Mo Akong Limutin, a relationship between couples and between parents and children are complicated by impotence, murder, and adultery. So, he got into trouble with the censors. GDL's unique visual style. Okay, so how did he create this unique visual style in filmmaking? It's a style that tells the story of a film primarily through images on screen. It is a style that gave his films a distinct personal character, the style that critics and film artists and technicians admired most in his films. But this is a style that can only work if the director has real control over all the elements of cinema in shooting every scene. An analysis of GDL's way of handling each of these elements might shed light on what this style consisted of and how this style came about or was realized. The screenplay. He believed in realism, specifically the depiction of characters and situations so that they come off as true to life. And for GDL, realism applied not only to films like Ang Daigdig ng Mga Api, where the film practically mirrors life in all its aspects, but even to fantasy films like Sandawong and Jezebel. Right? Paano yun? Where GDL invests the plot with the logic of real life and his characters with emotions that come off as human. Right? Overall, for GDL, the Filipino film should present not stories imitative of foreign film imports, but narratives drawn from the lives of Filipinos to the past or to the present. Paano niyang ginawa yan? Kasi comic stories ang ang paborito ng mga producer, right? Ang comics kasi, pag lumabas na yan sa in-print, may following na yan. Kukunin mo yung pinaka-popular, pag ginawa ang pelikula yan, meron ka na kagad audience. Kasi lahat ng mga nabasa ng comic, gusto nilang makita kung ano mangyayari dun sa And may technique pa yan, yung comics will run this way. Yung pelikula, ipapalabas nila, hindi pa tapos yung series. Right? Mga 2 issues pa. Di siyempre, height nung yun, di ba? Na suspense. So, ang daming manonood talaga para malaman kung paano, anong mangyayari. So, and of course, we all know how the comics are, di ba? Napaka-fantasya at saka walang sa realidad, etc. Paano mong gagawin ngayon yan sa pelikula? Interesting ang ginagawa niya. Sabi niya, sa mga ganyang pelikula, first, I make sure that the plot is logical. Okay? And then, nag-infuse talaga siya ng human element. Love ito between a playboy and a mermaid. Paano yun? Di ba? Pero, pag pinanood mo yung pelikula, mamumove ka. Right? Kasi may magkakaroon ka ng empathy dun sa mga characters niya. Right? Sabi niya also, kailanman, sabi ni Eddie Romero, he will never agree to an illogical story or a bad characterization, and sabi niya, hastily put together cinematography. Right? Yun ang inaalagaan niya sa mga pelikula niya. GDL conceptualized all his screenplays and wrote or co-wrote most of them with the following, no? Eddie Romero, discovery niya si Eddie Romero, Federico Santos, Dig de Jesus, Cesar Amigo, Pierre Salas, among others. Each of these writers knew and accepted the fact that even if GDL was presented with the finished script, no, he would inevitably change this while shooting if he felt that the scene being shot would not call for such dialogue or even for any dialogue. He would even add scenes or even new characters during the actual shoot. Sa daigdig ng mga PA, yung dalawang major characters were added during the shoot. Okay? This style did not sit well with writers in English, Nick Joaquin and Adrian Cristobal. He asked Nick Joaquin to write the script for Bagong Umaga, yung USIS funded, no? Sulat naman si Nick Joaquin, Nick Joaquin wrote the whole article on it, galit na galit siya. Kasi, papasulat daw sa kanya, pagkatapos, gigisingin siya na alas 3 ng umaga, dadalhin siya dun kung nag-shoot, susulat nila ni Pierre Salas, babasahin ni Leon, tapos isushoot niya, walang dialogue. Inis na inis siya, bakit ba ako mag-ano kung ganun pala? Right? And this went on and on. I mean, talagang halos lahat. And then, he was worried kasi, paano yan, ang screenplay, hindi buo, mag-shoot? Paano nangyari yun? Right? Ganun pinagawa sa kanya. Scene. Hindi na buo yung screenplay. Pero it doesn't mean na walang screenplay. Nasa head ni Kumpleto na yung pelikula kasi sa utak niya. So, lahat ng mga pinagagawa niya, actually gusto lang niya makita ano yung point of view mo, di ba? Mag-a-apply ba yan dito sa sitwasyon na ito? Pag hindi nag-apply, i-rewrite niya or aalisin niya altogether. Okay? So, Adrian Cristobal naman, naging scandal yan sa literary circle sa Manila. He wrote the script for filibusterismo. Okay? Eh di siyempre, ano nangyari? Unang-una sa Ingles, so translate ni Jose Flores Sibal, no? As usual, binago ni right? And what is the point here? Writers in English, writers in general, I think, when they create something, they think that that is their authorship, that is their work. Nobody can tamper with it. Because we're raised that way, di ba? Poem ko to, huwag mong pakialaman. Okay? Hindi ganun sa pelikula. Sa pelikula, direktor talaga ang author. Right? At lahat ng mga writers niya, alam yon na, and by the way, he co-wrote everything. His stories, his major stories, came from his head. Tapos, isusulat niya, meron siyang co-writer para lang sabi niya, makita niya objectively kung itong sinusulat ko sa utak ko lang. Right? Valid lang ba yan sa utak ko? Pero sa kanya talaga nangyayari. Totoong author Hawak niya talaga from concept to last edited frame, right? So, hindi maintindihan ni Nick Joaquin yan tsaka ni Adrian Cristobal because they come from the English lit tradition, which is completely different from the tradition of Philippine cinema. Okay? Pero, nanalo sila because of him. nung manalo ang filibusterismo ng best screenplay, kasama si Adrian Cristobal. Right? Hindi selfish sa si Gerardo de Leon, no? Gusto niya talaga maano niya yung mga tao niya. And actors, okay. In GDL, the choice of actors for a film was crucial for the success of film. In selecting actors, GDL did not consider the physicality of the actor only. More important, he used his feeling to sense if the actor had the sincerity that is the foundation for good acting. Finding this, GDL would cast actors with established images already, no? In roles one would never associate with them. As happened when he chose playboy type Jose Padilla Jr. to play the bandit leader PLUME in Sawa sa Lumang Simbolyo. Nobody believed that bagay si Padilla as PLUME. Pero nung lumabas na yung film, my God, everybody was may ano siya, marunong siyang kumilatis. Kung mahusay talaga yung artista, ibig sabihin sincere. Sincere, hindi pwedeng fluffy, silly actions sa kanya, no? Pakita mo sa akin yung totoo ba yung... For this reason, he also often preferred newcomers. Mas gusto niya newcomers who come to him tabula rasa. To name actors who find it difficult to learn new tricks kasi may stereotypes na sila eh. Such as newcomer Rita Gomez, whose role as bandit leader under PLUME was expanded because she proved to be very teachable. Yun ang word ni, Other fresh recruits, GDL shaped into actors, Lina Carino and Noli Metangre as Sisa. Lenny Alano in the picture, in Ang Daigdig ng Mga Api. She was a bayanihan dancer, right? And the young Nora Honor. Gusto niya si Nora kasi sabi niya, very teachable. Ang dali-daling po-make up ng instructions, no? Having been an actor on both stage and film, GDL knew if an actor was truly immersed in the character or was just saying the lines correctly, but not from inside the character the actor was playing. GDL was known to have kept actors sweating under the hot lights, repeating their scene over and over up to 15 takes until they got what GDL wanted. Siyempre, worried din yung producer, 15 takes. Sabihin mo, tatapon na di ba? Na pelikula yon. Anita Linda, who played Sabel sa one at sa Lumang Simborio, half jokingly and half seriously called GDL sadista because hardly had the doctor finished nursing a local wound that she got from falling off a horse in Sawa when GDL asked him to come back to the set where she had to ride the horse again. And she could not tell GDL that her vagina was already swollen from riding the horse without a saddle. Pero ginawa pa rin niya. And of course, Anita Linda is a superb actress. Right? But it was also Anita Linda, first acclaimed as an actress in GDL Sisa, who said that in her time it was believed that one was not a real actor unless he or she had been directed by GDL. And this because many actors won their famous awards only in films where they were directed by GDL. In other words, siya talaga yun. Siya talaga yun. An example was Leopoldo Salcedo. Ang dami ng pelikula ni Leopoldo Salcedo, hindi siya nanalo. Nanalo lang siya ng FAMAS when GDL directed him. Right? Nominated for Noli, because he was Elias, and then he won for Moises Padilla story. No? Production design. GDL demanded the correct costumes, props, and locations for the films. Gloria Romero narrates that in one shoot for Juan de la Cruz, 1976 ito, GDL packed up the shoot even with all the actors already assembled in costume because the staff, after all the instructions, came up with the wrong antique plancha. Ang planchang ginamit, yung may takip. Ang gusto niyang plancha yung mas matanda doon, yung open. Alam mo yun? Yung araw open, yung may live coals. Yun, igaganon mo. He packed up everybody. For location, GDL generally used three types. Period films like Padre Burgos, Noli Fili. He wanted to shoot in old towns like Vigan, with its period buildings, to create the authentic world required by the films. For rural scenes, he used towns like Angono Rizal for Noli and barrios near Mount Arayat for Daigdig, farms of the Santiagos in Polo, Bulacan for Commander Sundang. For movies set in other countries, again for authenticity, he shot them in that country. So, 10th Battalion was shot in Korea at the 38th parallel. Saigon was shot in Vietnam, right? And Sandawang was shot in Hong Kong. For over and above authenticity, okay, GDL also found ways to make the setting or the set props add a layer of meaning to the scene. I think narito yung genius niya, no? Mainly through the use of deep focus, which clearly captures images from front to middle to back. In one of the most exquisite scenes in Noli, ito yung scene na yan, Sisa kneels in front of the altar where a candle lights a crucifix at left and an image of the mother and child in a frame with glass at right, while Basilio sleeps on a mat on the on the floor at her right side, dead tired from running home from the church tower in the Sacristan Mayor and being graced by a bull. As Sisa prays the Our Father in Tagalog, the camera shoots her back at foreground, ito, and at background, the reflection of her face on the glass frame superimposed on the image of Mary carrying the Christ child, to whom she prays in the hope perhaps that Mary, as a mother herself, would understand her predicament and protect her son Crispin, unconscious of the fact that the image of the Virgin she is praying to cannot and will not help her because she is garbed in the rich robes of Spanish royalty and is in its service. This irony is underscored when, after Basilio's dream of Crispin being whipped and hitting his head fatally, the scene ends with Sisa, completely ignorant of what has happened to Crispin, reciting the last words of the Our Father, at iadya mo po kami sa lahat ng masama, or deliver us from all evil. Right? In De Leon, even the set prop contributes to the discourse of a scene. Right? Siya nag-add niya na, wala sa noli yan. Wala sa noli. In other words, as director, when he visualizes a scene, he knows what the story is, he knows the whole culture behind that scene. He's able to make comments of himself, di ba? Ano yan additional layer of meaning yan. Wala sa nobela yan. Siya na mismo yan nag-a-add ng layer of meaning, no? Cinematography, fully realizing that the visual form of the film is created not by technology but by the director, GDL meticulously planned the lighting and camera work he used for every scene. For this, GDL would come to the set earlier than everyone, view the location, and adjust his blocking of the scene to the location. Then set up the cameras, then the lights, and finally, the mics. Right? The setup took more hours than the actual shoot. Right? Sabi ni Amalia Puentes, hours talaga maghihintay sila, isa-set up lang yung lights. Yung actual scene is the fraction of that whole period. No? The setup took more hours than the actual, especially if the scene was to be shot at night. Okay? This is Gerardo de Leon in the middle, shooting a scene from Huwag Mo Akong Limutin. Ito yung tungkol sa mag-asawa sila, impotent na itong husband, so naging adulterous itong babae. Ito yung controversial na pelikula. No? Lighting was either natural light or daytime with the aid of reflectors for outside scenes, or provided by tungsten lamps for evening, indoor, and outdoor scenes as well as indoor the daytime scenes. These lamps provided the key light or the main light source, mimicking the literal source of the light in the scene. For example, the window of a sala or the night lamp on the table. They were also used for the fill or secondary lights, which eliminate unwanted shadows, create three-dimensionality, and, ito importante, highlight the actor's eyes through which the camera captures the actor's emotion. Sabi ni Lilia Dizon, the director, GDL, always wants you and the camera to be best friends. Kasi ang gusto ni De Leon, makuli niya yung mata. Kasi sa mata nakikita yung kaluluwa at yung tunay na emosyon, di ba? Kaya siya, ang plano ng lahat, pag ng camera, dapat eksakto yung ulo nung actor. Kaya inaano niya yung actor, pag ina-block niya, hawak yung ulo, o ganyan, dahan-dahan. Ganun niya. Nire-rehearse niya. Tapos, ang ibig sabihin nun, pag turn na ganon, kuha nung camera niya yung mata. Okay? Kasi sa kanya, yung mata talaga doon mo nakikita ang sincerity ng emotion. In his earlier films, Jesus used old heavy Mitchell cameras. By 1960s, he had reflex cameras, which make fluid pans and tilts possible with his liquid head. Just the same, every change of shot needed a new setup of the cameras. According to Trofeo, depending on what effect GDL wanted from a shot, he chose from the following: wide range 25 millimeters, medium range 40 or 35, close-up 50 millimeters, extreme close-up 75, and especially, ito yung special lens, the 18 millimeter Angenu lens with retrofocus, the same one that Orson Welles used for Citizen Kane. for defocus. Siya lang ang meron nun sa industriya. Right? Binili daw ito sa isang Amerikano na producer. Okay? And that's why, ayun yung tiyan mo yung extreme defocus niya. No? Kasi pag defocus, hindi ka na kailangan mag-answer shot for anything or reaction shot kasi nandun ng lahat. Makikita mo, right? Hindi na puputol yung realidad. To GDL, the camera angle must create a definite mood by itself. Sadness, depression, elation, rapture, madness, fear, anger, all this had to be in the frame itself actor's performance. This belief is expressed in GDL's requirement that, quote-unquote, every shot must tell a story, right? Meaning, the uniqueness of each shot responds directly to the dramatic tension of the moment. Okay? In general, GDL follows a series of shots for the cameras, as exemplified with the shots used for this scene of Elias and Ibarra talking on a boat in the middle of the lake. Ito yung actual scene na yun, right? Actually, ito, akala mo na sa pelikula, akala mo nasa gitna sila ng lake. Hindi, nandun sila sa shallows. Right? Kasi kailangan hawakan yung, talian yung boat, no? Okay. Ano yun? First, a long shot of the boat on the lake with the two characters on the boat. Then, over-the-shoulder shots, Elias, Ibarra in sequence as they answer each other. Then, series of close-ups. Then, insertion of scenes from Elias's tragic life. Then back to the scenes of close-ups. Okay? So, ito si Gerardo de Leon, inaano si Elias, si Leopoldo sa dito, kasi nahihirapan mag-memorize. Okay? Ang asset ni Leopoldo is pag nakuha na niya yung emotion, talagang ang laki-laki ng emotion na lumalabas. Right? Yun ang kanya. Kaya perfect siya talaga for Elias. Ang nakatayo sa gitna, sa likod ni Manong, is Carlos Francisco. Botong Francisco. Kasi siya ang designer ng Noli. Okay? And Jose Flores Sibal is the one with the script. Ito yung magandang scene. Sinasabi ko sa inyo na parang Figueroa. For some outdoor scenes, GTL used the sun as backlight and waits for certain clouds to come out. A beautiful shot is that from Ang Daigdig ng Mga Api, when the camera captures the farmer Inong, Roberto Rebolo, standing on his Carabao cart and waving his hat to call his friend Israel, just arrived from Manila. Notice the clouds behind Inong, creating a joyous background for the reunion of the two friends. No? Hinihintay niya yung araw. Para si Akira Kurosawa, ganun din eh. Hihintay niya yung eksaktong angle ng araw bago siya mag-shoot. GTL also used the camera for the effects he wanted. In the Noli scene where Ibarra and Maria Clara say a final farewell to each other at the azotea, stairs at the back of the house, beside the river, watery shadows were projected onto the unexpressive face of Maria Clara, okay, created by shining a light on the water being moved slowly on the thin cover of a reel of film. Okay? I don't know if you've seen Noli. Edita Vitalis, kailangan kinuha yun kasi Miss Philippines. Hindi siya talaga marunong umarte. Walang nag-register sa emotion doon sa mukha niya. Right? Para umiyak siya, nilalagyan pa ng Vicks. So, itong last farewell, isipin mo, hindi na kayo makikita, di ba? Naku, di kailangan umiyak talaga siya, tsaka makita. Hindi, lang nag-register. Ang ginawa ni Gerardo de Leon, kasi may river, di ba? Alam mo yung cover lang nung box nung camera, nilagyan ng foil, nilagyan ng tubig. Akala mo, tubig nung river nagre-reflect sa mukha niya. Ang ganda-ganda ng scene. Na-cover yung lack of expression. Ang nag-express na lang yung tubig. Okay. So, most critics who gush over GDL's visual style remember specific scenes from his movies. For example, Gabriela Silang haranguing his fellow Ilocanos to rise against the Spaniards, tapos raising Diego Silang's head as the camera reaches a close-up of her face. The leper Maria Clara, ito yung scene yun. Maria Clara in Noli, which ends with the tableau, ito yung tableau, no? Of the social hierarchy in Spanish times. With the leper and Sisa crouched on the ground, the more affluent Indios standing near them, the Guardia Civil horses looking down on all this, and the church steeple dominating the whole scene from the background. That's the social hierarchy. The most powerful is the church, and then the military, and then the middle classes, and then finally the outcasts. Right? Paano mong gagawin yan kung hindi mo naintindihan yung social history ng Spanish period? One of the most memorable is one of the best scenes of sa Lumang Simboria, where the wounded, good-hearted bandit Tulume rides his horse up the stone steps in Santa Maria Church atop a hill to return the crown of the Virgin that the dying bandit Marta had, as an act of contrition, asked him to return to the church. That's a beautiful scene. Right? And of course, hinanap talaga nila yung lugar para dito at nahanap nila ang Santa Maria. If you've been to Santa Maria, this church is just out of this world. Huh? Editing. For GDL, a good director must also be a good editor because he believed that editing is filmmaking itself. Right? The very act of creation. His editors functioned as his assistants, preparing and choosing the work print for him, and later printing the finished film. Pero siya mismo ang nag-edit. So lahat ng mga nanalo na editors niya, ang nanalo doon si Gerardo de Leon. Kasi siya talaga, lang sila, taga-print lang nung gagamitin niya. Right? Kasi nga naman, kahit mahusay yung artista mo, mahusay yung everything, pwede masira sa editing yun. Diba? Maling editing, sira lahat yun. Walang effect din. No? Alam mo ba nag-edit yan kahit nanonood sila ng Nollywood, sabi ni Dick Trofeo, nanonood sila sa Galaxy. Pinapanood niya, he realized, itong scene na to, nagda-drag, kailangan putulin to. You know what he did after the film? He went up to at talagang mineasure niya, pinutol niya doon. Sabi ni Dick, hindi yan, walang bibiola yan, kasi isang hatak niya, alam niya 24 frames. Alam niya. So, eksakto pag dugtong niya ulit, eksakto yung pelikula. Okay? Ganun siya if he did the same thing, it was screening already, pinutulan pa rin niya. Right? Kasi sabi niya, masyado nag-drag, kailangan maano. Okay. In general, GDL employed 4 types of editing. For chronological editing, yun ang pinaka-common, right? Yung logic of time and place. When necessary, such editing may be interrupted by flashbacks or embedded with the same. So ito yung magandang ginawa niya sa Nolly. In the Nolly, so as not to confuse the audience, di ba yung mga audience natakot sa pag nag-flashback na, naguguluhan sila. Okay? Dito ang ginawa niya, yung flashback is on the walls of the street, visualizing the narration of Teniente Guevara to Ibarra about what happened to his father. Di ba yung nag-usap sila sa street sa gabi, tapos may mga blank wall. Sa blank wall niya project yung flashback. So hindi umalis sa present. Kitang-kita mo na ito na kinukwento. Right? So that's ganun siya. Cross-cutting is used when 2 sets of action happening at the same time but not necessarily in the same place are parallel to make a statement for maximum effect. Okay, in Diego Silang, the beheading of Diego Silang is parallel with Magdalena's fatal stabbing of Vicos, the one who betrayed Diego. Okay? So parang dalawang execution na magkasabay. No? Ito yung head ni Diego Silang na tinataas. No? Defocus editing connects 2 scenes, both shot in defocus to show the breadth and depth of the scenes. Many scenes of this type are found in Walls of Hell Intramuros, when the combined forces of the Filipinos and Americans staged their attack on the Japanese soldiers to liberate the thousands of Filipinos hostage in February 1945. Okay? In the manner of Eisenstein, GDL used montage to create a collision between 2 successive shots. In the Noli procession, first is shown the beautiful Virginal Maria Clara singing Ave Maria before the carro of the Immaculate Conception from the window of Kapitan Tiago's bahay na bato, di ba? As everyone, Spaniard, Mestizo, or Indio, looks up to her adoringly. Okay? Then, at the end of the song, immediately following, is the shot of the poor sexually abused madwoman Sisa peering out of the prison bars, singing a lullaby about a flower that wants to open its petals. Okay? Very, very effective yung juxtaposition na yan. Ano? Perfectionist was, GDL was known to edit films. Okay, I explained this already. GDL music and scoring. Scoring for a movie would use two types of music, diegetic, di ba? Like Maria Clara singing Luces las Oras in Sisa, or non-diegetic. Okay. Sometimes there is a theme song also na ginagamit like Bakyamo Neneng. Okay. In 1958, film critic Alberto Munoz interviewed GDL's collaborators, Ariston Abilino and Tito Arevalo, about the function of music in their films. Abilino said, our stories are so thin and inadequate that a scoring is needed to give them the desired effect. That is the secret of most genre movies. Kasi ang genre movies, wala naman talagang laman. So, paano ka mag-create ng emotion? Music. Right? Para maiyak yung tao, dalhin mo na lang sa music. Okay? So it is the duty, sabi naman ni Arevalo, it is the duty of the musical composer and director to transform the element of unreality, fantasy, and myth into something real, alive, and believable. Okay? Although this doesn't always work kasi itong si Arevalo dun sa Sandawong, gumagamit siya ng music na hindi tama, no? Like Beethoven Symphony No. 5, yung ginamit niya sa attack on the prison. Ganon. So I don't know why he allowed that. Samantalang siya gusto ni GDL always original yung shot, no? Okay, valuation. Critic Alcavili believes that GDL has proven himself to be a real director based on the films he made in the last 30 years, 1938 to 68. However, this writer believes that GDL achieved the organic or interrelated realization of the ideological and the visual, not in the same but in varying degrees of success. Perhaps GDL's films may be categorized into three tiers based on how substantial was its insight into Philippine reality and how truthfully and effectively that insight was relayed to the viewer through the creative orchestration of the elements of cinema. Belonging to the first tier, these are his best pieces, no? Extraordinary artistry and very deep insights into Filipino culture, no? So, Sisa, sa Wasulumang Simboryo, Huwag Mo Akong Limutin, No Limitangere, Efubusirismo, Moises Padilla, and Daigdig ng Mga Api. Ito yung, pinaka-best niya talaga. Many of the other extant films could be characterized as good films that generally had coherent narratives, adequate characteristics, good production values, but might be flawed or lacking in some aspect of production. For example, script, acting, production design, or in depth of theme or insight into Filipino psyche or society. So, 48 Oras, Sandawong, Bagong Maestra, Pedro Penduko, Jezebel, Walls of Hell, Lilet Banawe, and Caridad. Last, yung commercial films that had standard genre stories of horror, romance, fantasy, war, as well as predictable plots and passable acting, but had notable visuals because of careful cinematography and editing, would belong to this category. So, Kulay Dugo ang Gabi, Ibulong Mo sa Hangin, Terrorist a Man, The Brides of Blood Island, Mad Doctor of Blood Island, and Women in Cages. Okay? Like most directors, GDL did not and could not always create masterpieces because he lived in a third world country where the local film was stunted by profit-oriented producers, the huge competition from well-budgeted American films, and a conservative and double-standard system of censorship. But even in the most commercial of his films, GDL carried his standards with him. He would not stand for an illogical plot or a sloppy shot because even in his pot boilers, he cared to create a decent film. This is why his films, when merely competent to the memorable and masterful, left a mark on the generations of audiences in his time and after. Eddie Romero looks back on GDL's films in his tribute to his mentor, colleague, and friend. So sabi niya, so what can I say about the films of Gerardo de Leon? Heavily mannered they were indeed, contrived and implausible quite often. But at his best, none of this mattered, for Jerry's vision did not depend on objective veracity, or a seemly reticence. He blew bugles. He beat drums. He danced naked in the streets. And when he was good, and he was good more times than most, it all worked. It jarred you out of your snug complacency about your own values and gave you quick, sometimes frightening glimpses into the human soul that you, in all your urbane loquacity, could never begin to describe. It lured you into yearning for things that never were and never will be. For that is what Jerry did best, describing the indescribable in the human spirit in a way uniquely his own. Gide left the nation with an invaluable legacy. The first, of course, his films, as well as, bilisan ko na lang, no? Yung second, he also mentored quite a number of film directors, actors, production designers, cinematographers, editors, and so on. Okay? So, ito yung ilan sa mga na-train niya. Iyon isa sa malaking contribution niya sa pelikulang Pilipino, yung training ng lahat ng mga ito. Third, through his best films, he set a standard of excellence that contemporaries had to contend with. And for a reason. In his lifetime, GDL was recognized as the most awarded Filipino film director, having won 9 awards as Best Director and several Lifetime Achievement Awards. GDL was also directly responsible in large measure for at least 54 other awards and many more nominations received by his films and his collaborators from 1950 to 1976. Before his death, GDL lamented that he could have been a Kurosawa, an Ozu, or a Rai if he had not been censored. But such a thought was utterly baseless. He did not have to be a Kurosawa, Ozu, or Rai, because he was a Gerardo de Leon, and none of the above-mentioned masters of Asian cinema could, even with their prodigious talents, have duplicated Manong's works, and vice versa. And this because GDL, his masterworks could only have been created by a director formed in the womb of the Ilagan clan, who grew up and prospered in the less than ideal conditions of Philippine society before and after the war, and struggled to create his art in a film industry perennially plagued with heavy taxes, overwhelming competition, and influence from Hollywood and conservative censorship. Grappling with and rising above these conditions, GDL proved himself to be an outstanding third-world Filipino film artist who created works of national and international caliber and worth. GDL's valuable legacy was finally recognized by the nation less than a year after his death. On June 12, 1982, Gerardo de Leon was posthumously proclaimed National Artist for Film, a recognition that had existed among filmmakers and cineasts long before the actual award was officially conferred on him in 1982. Salamat, Manong, at sa inyong lahat sa pakikinig.
Maraming salamat din po, Sir Nick, for that very comprehensive lecture on Manong Jerry De Leon. No? And we are, for an extra treat, we will have the response of Skilty Labastilla, who is an assistant professor from the Department of Interdisciplinary Studies.
Magandang araw sa ating lahat. Thank you to ILAP for inviting me and to Dr. Nick Tiongson for such a rich, illuminating lecture on the life and works of national artist Jerry De Leon. It is both an honor and a challenge to respond because what we have just heard is not only a survey, a masterful survey of a filmmaker's career, but also a cultural map of the shifting terrain of Philippine cinema itself. What struck me first in the lecture is the breadth of De Leon's journey as an artist. From Parlatone in the late 30s, through the wartime films of the Ega Haikisa, to his long years with Sampaguita and Premiere, and finally to independent ventures in both local and international contexts. Doc Nick has shown us how De Leon navigated a film industry that was shaped and is still shaped by the push and pull of commerce and artistry. And this, I think, is one of the most enduring lessons of De Leon's career, his ability to work within the constraints of the studio system while still imprinting his vision and discipline as a filmmaker. Many of his projects were on the surface commercial assignments, melodramas, action pictures, costume dramas, yet De Leon found ways to elevate them, as Doc Nick mentioned, through precision editing, through carefully composed shots, and a storytelling style that was both economical and expressive. We're reminded here that true artistry is not only about freedom, but also about mastery, the capacity to transform limitation into creativity. As a film critic and an educator myself, I'm particularly interested in how his works speak to the larger currents of our cultural and political history. De Leon's Sisa, No Le Metangere, El Filibusterismo were not simply literary adaptations. They were acts of national remembering at a time when post-war society was negotiating its identity. Ifugao and the Moises Padilla story reveal cinema as a mirror of collective struggle, whether rooted in indigenous traditions or in the brutal realities of electoral violence. De Leon cinema, therefore, was never only about entertainment. It was also about reckoning with who we are as a people. At the same time, we cannot ignore the more controversial aspects of his career. During the Japanese occupation, as Doc Nick earlier mentioned, De Leon worked under the Eiga Haikusa, directing films at a time when cinema was used as a propaganda tool. For some, this marked him as a collaborator. For others, it was a matter of survival, an artist working under impossible circumstances, navigating the politics of censorship and control. And as, again, Doc Nick mentioned, it was later revealed that he was, in fact, helping the guerrillas behind the scenes. After the war, another layer of complexity emerged in his openly anti-communist and pro-America films, which reflected not only his own political stance, but also the pressures and alignments of the Cold War era. These choices remind us that filmmakers, like all cultural workers, operate within history's pressures. They're not saints outside of time, but human beings negotiating compromise, ideology, risk, and sometimes contradiction. Acknowledging this dimension does not diminish De Leon's stature. Rather, it makes him more complex, more real, and his later achievements even more remarkable. But listening to this lecture also surfaces a sense of loss. Many of GDL's films are no longer with us, or exist only in fragments and poor prints. This is not just a personal tragedy for De Leon, it is a national tragedy for Philippine cinema. How can we fully appreciate the depth of a national artist's work and vision when so much of it remains unseen or neglected in archives? The urgency of preservation, restoration, and circulation cannot be overstated. If we want future generations of students, cinephiles, and critics to learn from Manong, then safeguarding his legacy is a cultural responsibility. On a personal note, what I admire most from Doc Nick's portrait of De Leon, the ultimate auteur, is his discipline, his almost obsessive perfectionism, which colleagues both feared and respected. It reminds us that film is not simply a product of inspiration, but of rigor, of patience and craft. In my own teaching, this is a point I highlight for students, that to study cinema meaningfully is to take seriously both the artistry on screen and the labor, compromises, and conditions that shape it. To close, let me thank Dr. Nick Tiongson once again for bringing us back to this Renaissance man, Gerardo de Leon, not as a static figure in our cultural pantheon, but as a living presence whose works continue to challenge and inspire. If there's one message we can take away, it is that his films are not relics of the past, but urgent texts for the present. asking us how to balance commerce and artistry, how to tell stories that matter, and how to preserve the cinematic heritage that defines us. And beyond remembering De Leon, let us also think about what it means to sustain Philippine cinema today. We live in the age of Netflix, YouTube, and on-demand entertainment, where global content is one click away. But if we do not actively seek out and support our own films, especially the work of independent filmmakers who continue the spirit of experimentation and cultural reflection of De Leon, then our cinematic heritage risks being drowned out. Patronizing local cinema is not just an act of entertainment, it is an act of cultural citizenship, of choosing to keep alive the voices that speak most directly to our histories, our struggles, and our dreams. Maraming salamat po, and I look forward to further conversations.
Thank you, Skilty, for that response. To provide the closing remarks for this event, we have Dr. Vincent Serrano, the editor of Kritika Kultura and associate professor in the Literary and Cultural Studies program.
Okay, salamat Francis. So thanks so much, Professor Nick. No, let me start off by saying, like, as also a researcher and as part of the faculty of the LCS program, I am in awe of Professor Nick's erudition and wide historical knowledge. No, as was explained in the introduction, part of the faculty, no, of Philippine Studies here, establishing and working on journals like Katipunan, okay, which I avidly read, no, for some reason, like the 1970s iteration as part of my research, and all the way to his work on the CCP Encyclopedia, which I think already is in the second edition, so please read that as well, for a wellspring of knowledge and history on Philippine literature, cinema, art, okay, architecture, and so on and so forth. And as that, we see very focused example of that erudition and deep historical awareness now on the part of Professor Nick with his lecture on Manong, no, Gerardo de Leon. This lecture, I think, as being part of a series of the foundational lectures of the LCS program, we're happy to see, no, yet another angle, as it were, of this particular history, and that is that of cinema. Okay, so more often than not, we in the LCS program like look at literary texts, okay, cultural phenomena, okay. Some of the authors mentioned by Professor Nick, yung kaaway niya si Nick Joaquin, no, for changing the script is like common, you know, fare, no, for LCS students, and yet at the same time with today's lecture we see Professor Nick opening up a door to cinema, okay, which something I think LCS students, okay, faculty, and enthusiasts can also look at. What I picked up, no, from Professor Nick's approach, of course, would be that expansiveness, okay, that wide sweep of knowledge, as well as that sensitivity to the formal dimensions of cinema, which Professor Nick like kept raising, like the cinematography, the script writing, the set design, down to shall we say, no, the plancha. Okay, you should have the correct plancha, no, when you're filming historical movies. Okay, that said, this formal knowledge, this formal awareness is runs alongside a deep, you know, understanding no, of the politics of the time, okay, of the culture at the time, okay, the ideologies of the time, which makes Professor Nick's analysis no, of Manong very deep, wide-ranging, complex, and even contradictory. Okay, so I hope my colleagues in the LCS program and I will join our hands, as well as our students will join our hands in thanking Professor Nick no, for this particular lecture. Which I think no, is but a foreshadowing of the future lectures that the program will organize as part of its foundational lecture series. So thank you very much.
Okay, before we go, the Literary and Cultural Studies program wants to present Dr. Nicanor Tiongson, a simple certificate for serving as resource speaker at the Ateneo Literary and Cultural Festival, hosted by the Literary and Cultural Studies program on this day, 15th of September 2025. To present this certificate, can I call again to the front Dr. Charlie Verick, LCSP Program Director, Dr. Vince Serrano, again, of Kritika Kultura, and Luisa Gomez, the moderator of PLUME, and of course, Dr. Nick Tiongson in front. Thank you. And can we have a very quick, should we move here? Okay, dito na lang. So can we ask everyone who participated in the lecture to come to the front for a very quick photo op with Sir Nick.
There is food at the pantry, so please feel free to join us for lunch. Thank you.